Good evening. You're watching a special edition of World News Tonight. I'm Aaron Darman. Days of heavy rain, widespread flooding and at least 8 dead across Romania, Austria and Poland. That's the tragic reality of Storm Boris, and tonight we'll be taking you live to our correspondents across the region. Marek Steele is in Nysa, Owidiusz Nicieja is in Głuchołazy, and John Todd is near Bielsko-Biała. Now here's our first report, which shows the size and scale of this devastating weather event. The mayor of Nysa in the Opole region ordered an evacuation of the city earlier this afternoon. Authorities cut the amount of water being discharged from a nearby reservoir for 3 hours to help people move to safety. Our correspondent Marek Steele is following the evacuation on the ground. Marek, what's the situation there?
Good evening. It's a critical moment for Nysa, for the entire region, as you mentioned, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Local time. So now the discharge from the Lake Nysa, which is located just a few kilometers from here, was lowered from 1,000 cubic meters per second to 800 cubic meters per second. Firstly, this was done to let people safely evacuate from their homes in Nysa, and secondly, for the army to be able to rebuild the levee that was broke just yesterday when water broke through that levee and flooded the city. I was there this morning. Water levels had already fallen, but people were unaware, it seems, of the fact that another wave is coming. And that's due to the fact that this dam nearby on the Lake Nysa is only one of 4 dams on the lake, on the river Nysa-Kłodzka. The first one, water broke through it in the early afternoon today. So there are fears that the second and third and perhaps even the 4th dam here in Nysa could collapse. So a devastating weather event here for this part of Poland. I saw people evacuate, take their luggage, whatever they had, their pets, and simply they have to run away from the city because it is unclear whether the repair that the military has been doing to this levee will withstand another wave. Back to you.
Thank you, Marek. That's our correspondent Marek Steele from Nysa. Located near the mountains on the Polish-Czech border, Głuchołazy in the Opole region has so far been one of the hardest hit areas in Poland. Even though the water levels dropped since yesterday, parts of the town are still flooded. Our reporter Owidiusz Nicieja is on site. Owidiusz, what's the situation?
Well, now the water levels have dropped here, but what we see here is an absolute post-apocalyptic image. Still, there is water flowing on the streets here. But yesterday it was as high as 1.5 or even 2 meters high in the place where I am right now. So the houses here are completely damaged, devastated. And today what we saw was people returning to their homes, returning to their possessions to try and assess the scale of the damage. And it's completely vast. These are the words to describe this because water entered these houses and just ravaged everything on their way. So people were just trying to clear the mud from the streets and trying to get away the trash from the houses. It's absolutely devastating image. We have a soundbite of a lady who came here to help. Let's listen to her.
This cannot be described with words. I don't want to start crying right now, but this is horrible. People's entire life's work has been washed away.
So now there are few very difficult months ahead of this place. Even though the water levels have dropped, and for now there is no risk of flooding, although the authorities are advising people to watch the statements closely and see whether the risk will be changing. There are difficult months ahead of this place because some of these houses will take months before they are dried again and habitable once again. And so definitely there's no power, there's no running water. Very difficult situation here for the people. Now this flood wave is moving north to the other parts of the region, but here it has left complete and utter devastation.
Owidiusz, our correspondent in Głuchołazy, thank you so much and stay safe. Rescue efforts in Silesia have moved on from the initial phase of protecting lives to clearing up after the floods. Now, TVP World John Todd joins us from Głuchołazy. John, what's the latest?
Yeah, good evening there, Aaron. It's a big flood clear-up that we're looking at here. The fire brigade was saying earlier that they've moved on from threats to life and health. And I'm in this community where some 350 properties have been flooded. There were 45 people rescued. But when I came down here earlier, it was dark now, of course, but I'm surrounded by water. This is a raised road, and across the line from me, some 50 meters ahead, the road simply disappears into a dark, fast-moving torrent. There's little electricity around on the community that's stranded on the other side there, and it's difficult to even see where the water ends. Elsewhere in the region, I witnessed this afternoon an operation to manage the outflow of water in one reservoir, and that involved having to prepare communities for the possible flooding in a managed way. So they spent the night building sandbags in order to protect their properties and were offered shelters in the morning. Fortunately, it doesn't seem as though their homes were hit by the floods. But at the moment, we're simply involved in a pumping out operation here. We've got something like 4 or 5 trucks full of soldiers, and I counted 5 fire tenders, fire pumps going full stop. You may be able to hear them behind me. But this is a non-stop operation in order to try and save these properties and make the best of what they can at the moment.
Thank you, John. John Todd, one of our many correspondents across the country, bringing us the latest on these devastating floods. Other Central European countries are also battling severe flooding. Heavy rainfall across the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Austria has led to 6 deaths so far, as well as significant damage to property and disruption of public services.
The areas along the Polish-Czech and Polish-Slovakian borders have been the worst affected so far, as mountainous terrain focuses rainfall into narrow valleys. The high water level is being compared to the worst flood in living memory.
The water started flowing really fast. I hope it's at its maximum now, but the poor people down there, this is just like in 1997, exactly the same.
In the Czech Republic, flooding has blocked a number of roads and railways, disrupting transport. On Monday morning, over 250,000 households were left without electricity. Evacuations from the flooded areas continue, as thousands of people have had to leave their homes already.
Our whole apartment is underwater. The water was up to around here. We have nowhere to go, so we're waiting to be transferred somewhere.
The storms have also caused damage along the Danube Valley in Austria. In Bavaria, Germany, the river has burst its banks. Public transportation in the Austrian capital has seen significant disruptions due to the flooding.
The subway is much more affected than the surface transport at the moment. However, we also have to say that there can always be disruptions on the surface. You can see that the wind is very strong. Branches keep falling on roads and overhead lines.
Further downstream, Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia, is dealing not only with flooding but with fallen trees as well.
We are asking people not to use some roads today. If you can postpone your trip, please don't go there. We have problems on various roads where there are mainly fallen trees. The trams are not working at the moment because of the fallen trees.
Flooding has also occurred across northern parts of Romania as well as in neighbouring Moldova. Hungary is seeing higher water levels in its rivers, a problem which will likely worsen. After rains on Monday, the weather forecast does not predict any significant rainfall in the Central European region for the rest of the week. This is not the end of the problem, as the flood wave will continue to move downstream, affecting more towns and villages.
Today marks the first day of Berlin's new, stricter border controls. The controversial move comes as a response to an increasingly complex illegal migration issue in Germany. Our correspondent, Karolina Stolzmann, is on the Polish-German border observing the situation. Karolina, tell us about today. What's happened on the border?
Good evening, Aaron. So, like you said, today is the first day of these new restrictions being put in place. And, well, I am on the border that connects Subice, Poland with Frankfurt-Oder, so this is the border crossing itself. Now, let me tell you about today. We were expecting a completely different situation that what actually occurred. So, for context, yesterday we were waiting for roughly 2 hours to be able to cross the border, and we were even unable to do so because of the wait time. Some of the more persistent drivers, they've waited for up to 4 hours to be able to cross the border. Now, because we've been monitoring the situation since the early morning today, I've decided to test it out again to see how long it will actually take us to get through the border today, on the day these restrictions are being introduced. And well, from our little test, the results are rather surprisingly positive, as it took us just under 11 minutes to get through the border, and we are talking about a roughly 3-kilometer distance here for us. Moreover, we were able to cross the border today repeatedly. But just because it was easy for us to do doesn't mean that this is the case for everybody. Now, while on the German side of the border, we spoke to some of the protesters that were gathered on the bridge with signs, with slogans such as open minds, open hearts, open borders, to see how these new restrictions are impacting their life. So let's hear what they had to say about that.
I have a lot of friends and acquaintances who have been commuting since October last year and are always stuck in traffic jams. The roads are always closed, especially in Subice, and it's very problematic to get across the border at all. Sometimes the ambulances in Subice are parked in front of the hospital and can't get in or out. It's a disaster for Subice. I live in Frankfurt, but I'm also often in Subice. I go jogging in Subice or do something else or meet friends. I also have a lot of friends, a lot of acquaintances who have an uncertain residence status and who can't go to Subice at all.
Now, like I said, this is just day one of these new restrictions being put in place. And of course, I will be here for the coming days to continue to monitor the situation, and I will be keeping you updated on that. Back to the studio. Thank you.
Our correspondent Karolina Stolzmann at the Polish-German border, and we will be keeping a close eye on developments there. Thank you for your time. In a major shake-up, France has named Stéphane Séjourné as its new European Commissioner, following Thierry Breton's surprise resignation ahead of the 2024 elections. For the latest, we go now to our correspondent in Strasbourg, Sasha Farbach. Sasha, what's been the reaction of the MEPs to this? Are the commissioners now finally all set to be announced?
Yeah, hi there. Good evening, Aaron. Well, indeed, that would be nice, wouldn't it? But that would be too simple for the European Union. And indeed, I mean, just recall that back on Friday, the head spokesman for the European Commission, on this sort of note already with a holdup from Slovenia, said, well, 24 hours is a long time in politics. And we put that to the test. And look, this morning we had Thierry Breton and everything that happened there, him resigning, very much accusing of von der Leyen of going behind his back. And look at that. A few hours later, we have now a new candidate. France has now placed the very much experienced outgoing foreign minister, and also someone who's well known here around Parliament as head of the Renew group here, that liberal group, Macron's liberal group here in the Parliament. So this is a good fit at this point in time. Now, in terms of what we've heard in some of the conversations, there was already certain bad relationship already going back to March between von der Leyen and Thierry Breton. This is someone who very much had his own career in mind, so it's known that there was already disagreement there. Nevertheless, he had quite a powerful portfolio, but it wasn't quite all positive, and there is some disappointment at this now new selection, Mr. Séjourné, and we spoke to a Green MEP. Let's hear what the reaction was.
We are very disappointed with the fact that France has again nominated a man. We are striving to have a gender-balanced commission, and having a woman, a strong woman coming from France, and I can reassure you there are a lot of strong potential candidates, would have been a good push into that direction. So we will see how the hearings go, but of course another woman would have been much more positive for my group.
So there we have the reaction of one of the co-leads of the Green Group. Now, of course, this has now sparked discussion of what will happen next. Now, those hearings already seem to be delayed tomorrow and the next coming days. We will have some of those commissioner designates here. Ursula von der Leyen is due to make an appearance here tomorrow speaking to the College of Commissioners, and we'll see if those names or portfolios will be released or if we're going to have more delays here in Strasbourg. Aaron, back to you.
24 hours, indeed a long time in politics. Sasha Farbach from Strasbourg, thank you for your time. 9 weeks after an attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania, Republican nominee Donald Trump has again been the target of yet another politically motivated attack. Secret Service agents opened fire at a gunman hiding in bushes at Trump's golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Trump, who was golfing a few hundred meters away from the shooter, was unharmed. The Secret Service rushed him to a secure location. The suspect was later arrested and identified by American media as 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ralph. According to the FBI, he left an AK-47 style assault rifle, 2 backpacks and other items at the scene. This was the second attempt on Trump's life after a shooting during his rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, over 2 months ago. Trump quickly addressed the situation on his social media site, Truth Social.
I would like to thank everyone for your concern and well wishes. It was certainly an interesting day.
The White House said in a statement that President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris had been briefed about the incident and were relieved to know that Trump is safe.
One thing I want to make clear, the service needs more help, and I think the Congress should respond to their needs if they in fact need more services.
The unsuccessful attempt sparked various reactions and comments, most notably from Elon Musk in a since-deleted post on X, formerly Twitter, saying, "And no one is even trying to assassinate Biden/Kamala." The close call highlights the furthering divisions in the American society, with the presidential elections steadily approaching.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer wants to see how Italy managed to curb the influx of illegal migrants arriving to the country by sea. His Italian counterpart's government recently implemented a migration deal with Albania, which helped significantly slash the number of illegal migrants arriving on Italian borders. Starmer visited Rome on Monday, just a day after at least 8 people died trying to cross the English Channel from France to the United Kingdom.
Upon his arrival to Rome, Starmer has said he wants to understand how Italy had managed to significantly slash its number of migrant arrivals.
I'm here to have discussions here at this coordination centre and with the Prime Minister about how we deal with unlawful migration.
London and Rome both aim to reduce arrivals by sea. On Sunday, at least 8 people died after their boat capsized while trying to cross the English Channel from France to the United Kingdom.
A new tragedy occurred around 1 o'clock this morning off the coast of Angleterre, where a migrant boat sank.
Italy has managed to curb migration by signing a deal with Albania last year, under which some asylum seekers are sent to the Balkan country, which also processes their asylum requests.
The idea was that some thousands of migrants could be hosted by these campuses in Albania.
The centre-left Labour Party British Prime Minister isn't a natural political ally of Meloni, who heads the right-wing Brothers of Italy party. However, the two sides said they are willing to work together to reduce irregular migration to Europe and restore the UK's relations with the rest of the European states post-Brexit.
Back to our major developing story now, and to reflect on these devastating weather events and what might be behind them is Maciej Zalewski, Professor at the European Centre for Eco-Hydrology. Professor, good evening. Thank you for your time.
Good evening.
First of all, was Poland and the region prepared for a storm of this scale?
I think that generally all the world is now more and more affected by global climate changes, and now the situation is effect of changes in global circulation, and also circulation which in past in Poland was east-west, west-east, and now is becoming south-north, and very hot, full of vapor air from the Mediterranean Sea is coming and clashing with cold front, and that's why we have such intensive rains in Austria, Czechia, and Poland. Especially we have some mountains, like Sudety mountains, which usually generate more of rain and precipitation.
Talk me through that. I mean, is this what we've seen over the last few days, climate change at work?
Yes, there is recently more and more scientific evidences that this is, in the past, exists heavy floods, but this event is just consequence extremely high temperature of the Mediterranean Sea, which was noted in this year. And this is a major consequence of this, and I think this is a very dramatic warning for the past, that we have all worked for reducing the probability of climate change going beyond the 1.5 degree in global scale. And of course, such strategies like Green Deal is extremely important to just reduce probability of such dramatic events in past, which is absolutely not guaranteed. They will not appear, however, the intensity will be not greater.
Do you have a sense that when it comes to, I guess, levers, political levers that could be pulled across Europe and for the European Union, is there a sense for you that in reality there's not enough political will to actually move on climate change and avoid events like this?
It seems that it's more complicated, because in reality climate change is in 50% depends on the political will and 50% of each of us. If each of us reduce the consumption of energy, this way will reduce emission of pollutants and emission of CO2. This will be very important, because recently we're approaching the carrying capacity of biosphere. And that's not only political will, but also behavior of us is absolutely critical. And also acceptation for such strategy like Green Deal, which is trying not only to reduce the impact on the climate, but also create certain adaptation measures which will, let's say, compensate the events like this which already appear.
You've already touched on it a little bit, but why do these enormous floods still happen despite the summer season and even droughts?
That's a very good question. I think we have an effect of climate change is changing not only atmospheric circulation, but also oceans are playing very important role, because they are absorbing lots of heat, and circulation of oceans are quite complicated, appear in 3 dimensions, not only 2. It means absorbing heat and releasing. And we have so-called El Niño phenomenon, which generates some events like, let's say, more intensive rain or more intensive drought, depends on a certain periodical sequence which appears in oceans.
We've talked about different solutions or political will, but what is a practical answer that could help here? Are, for example, more retention reservoirs, would they be helpful in events like this, or would they just be overwhelmed?
I will refer to the Einstein statement, who said that we never should try solve the new emerging problem, but the way of thinking will generate the problem. And as we can see, the strategy, which was good 50 years ago when climate change were not so intensive, it means focusing the prevention on the river valley reservoirs is not enough. We need now holistic approach. It means all catchment. We have to increase absorbing capacity of the catchment. It means we have to absorb so much water as possible in urbanized area, in the city, which are full of concrete. They should absorb at least half of the water which is coming there. Also, agricultural landscape is getting more and more homogenized. And the tree rows, land water ecotones between streams and fields, also forestry reduction, this all is generating the bigger, let's say, load of water from the catchment to the rivers. And when it's coming already to the large rivers, it's too late to really solve the problem, address and condition. So we have to start from the catchment, and next, small streams, small rivers, increase retentiveness. This will be also very important because we'll have big flood and big droughts. And that's why this retentiveness will be also preventing the droughts in such a large scale, which can have equally or even more serious consequences in the future.
And we've seen such serious consequences over recent days. I mean, as we've covered extensively here tonight, devastation across the region, lives lost. Is this the type of thing that we will only see more and more of because of climate change?
No, I think it's a synergy between human activity, between, as I mentioned, the change of character of the catchment, reduction of the retentiveness of catchment, like, for example, river channelization, which accelerate water outflow. And we have to reverse those processes by river renaturization, by increase the forest cover, which has enormous ability to absorb such intensive rain, and also increase complexity of agricultural landscape, which in Poland is more than 50% of the area of the country.
And so perhaps then, to end on a hopeful note, can climate change, can flooding like what we've seen this weekend, can it be avoided and stopped?
I think climate change is progressing, and already this is not very easy to stop. We can, by joint effort, it means politicians and society, as I said, creation culture of sustainability. We can really stop the climate change and this 1.5 degrees scenario. And if we keep business as usual, this is a danger to come 3 or more degree, which will create hot house, and the events which we're observing now will be much more intensive.
Maciej Zalewski,
So
Professor.
it's our choice.
Indeed. And thank you so much for your contributions tonight, Maciej Zalewski, Professor at the European Centre for Eco-Hydrology. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
And that's World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.